Deor Mahasa. Now, I've been meaning to make this video for about 5 years. I was going to make it on Hallowe'en in Shamhna, but I was at a conference, or a conference in honour of Sean O'Cullion, Professor Emeritus, the Irish Department in UCC. And when I got home, I was simply too tired to make it. So I'll offer this little video up as a small little homage to Sean O'Cullion, without whom I would say most people nowadays who have read on Tallianach wouldn't have read on Tallianach. And of course, he also has the Agus here, Sean h-Éireann, with the stress on the first syllable. So, this is a Halloween verse from Rinn in what's left of the Waterford Gaeltacht. I've put up the recording of Mícheál reciting the poem 5 years ago. Go and listen to him saying it from a fantastic book edited by Máirtín Verling. If you're from Waterford or the Oidhche, East Munster, which includes Limerick City, so if you're from Limerick City, you should be learning Oidhche Irish, basically the eastern half of Limerick. But anyway, what I'll try to keep it simple in this video, and I'll probably come back and do a few other. I'll go a bit deeper into the analysis, but I might just do a translation today, and I only have half an hour to make this, so off we go. So he says, "Vi nús fadó, ag muínttır h-Éireann, Shamhna, Maidhc thimpeall oras doras leis. Vi nús, there was a tradition, and notice that he says nús, or fadó, next to nasal consonants M, MH, N, NN, and NG. Long ago, at the people of Ireland, oige. Now, in school, of course, you learn egg, but it's spelt as og, stupidly. In Munster, you find that the third person of the preposition, of a few prepositions, so for example, what you learn in school, spelt like this. Now, this third person, at him, usually implying possession, would be regularly spelt as aige, which no dialect pronounces it as aige. A better spelling would be to spell it as o, oige, because o before a slender g or before any slender consonant is reasonably regularly pronounced as e. So he doesn't say egg, but oige. So you get, in Munster, you get egg before verbal nouns, as in ing words, walking, running, whatever, but you get oige before other nouns, all other nouns. Of course, he doesn't say muунttır or muunntır or anything like that, but the Oidhche East Munster pronunciation, muunttır, Mhaidhc, the people of Ireland. In the word oïge for night, and I should say, of course, that I've used the old punch, the over dot, instead of writing H after the consonant. But there's no one so dim that couldn't convert the over dot consonant to H. And when I come back and talk about the various words in more detail, I'll explain the classical spelling. So, of course, nowadays that is spelt or misspelt as that, or I for the CHE. The pronunciation is the same. But he says, with the nasal vowel, the eve of sound. Usually means the night before. So, for example, Anocht is Christmas Eve, the night before Christmas Day. So he says, Anocht, to go, thimpeall, to go around, oras, doras, from door to door with the horn, as in a musical horn for making noise. Agus Mhaidhc, and if they would get anything. And notice that he doesn't say Dháith, you might be expecting from school Irish for that to be Dháith, if they would get anything. Or even more correctly, after Dá, you get the subjunctive and not the Mocaníalach. But that's what they teach in schools, and that's what's said in most speakers of Munster Irish nowadays. But he says Mhaidhc, which is common enough to use ma even in place of the. If they would get anything, Mhaidhc. That word yo is related to the word gav, take or seize, as an order to you. Originally, gave was the root, and then over time it became yo, I should say, with the H, the shevu. Also, he says earr-de, if they got anything, but they often you drop the N in particularly in East Munster Irish, anything, earr-de. Jarhadís, he says. Not dearhadís with a D, but with a less historical shevu on the D, Jarhadís. And notice that in Munster, fadó, except after R, in a stressed syllable, is pronounced as ia, half long, ia. Jarhadís. Paıdır vagait, a good prayer for you. So if they got anything, the people going oras doras from door to door, they'd say a good prayer for you. Paıdır, actually from the Latin pater noster, our father. And then that came to just mean any prayer. And notice that it's a feminine word, so it unites. It softens the word ma, good, so paıdır ma. And if they didn't get it, oige. Actually, I should point that out, that in school they spell would get with the figh, but actually it would be suit Ulster dialects better to spell it with the gh. For example, gets has this h--Éireann, Shane Tyrone Irish. But anyway, h--Éireann, they'd give a couple of prayers or wishes for you or to you, that you wouldn't be the better of it. Nor h-Éarfaıdís. In school Irish, that would be written like that. But this is a better division of the words. I'll come back and talk about it when I have more time. Agus hidí an round. Now, this isn't something that you'll come across in school Irish. And there's the verse that used to be at them, or used to be by them. Here's the verse that used to be by them. Now, round, like most words that end in a broad consonant, so that have an a, o, u before the final consonant, but it's the consonant itself has a broad sound as opposed to its slender sound, mo as opposed to ni. In this case, you would expect round to be a masculine noun, and for it to be hidé on the round, but perhaps it was this hidí by itself was understood as one thing, probably not, but anyway, just notice the preposition. So not shini or anything like that, or shohe or anything like that, but he says hidí on the round féach uku. And here's the verse that used to be by them. And notice that being a feminine pronoun, even though the round is typically a masculine noun. Now I'll come back and analyze this in much greater detail when I've more time, but we'll go on. He says, Anocht a wungo vaungo. The eve of Samhain is tonight, or tonight is the eve of Samhain, but notice the word order. The Anocht is the fushnesh, the predicate. Now, ovungo vaungo, as he says in this particular recitation, is meaningless, but that's probably a corruption of muinntr, and I've put a lot of information about muinntr in the description box. You can read about her. He says, Sop isna finneoga. Isna finneoga. An important feature of East Munster Irish, and this includes Ossory and even South Galway sometimes. South Galway, Connemara, and the area around Oidhche in Kerry, that when you have O fadó next to a nasal consonant, so M or MH, N or NN or NG, the O fadó gets raised to U. So he says finneoga. And notice that the NN becomes an NG as well. Finneoga, which is quite different from probably what's mistaught in schools. A wisp of hay in the windows. Agus a dún an oighche, and closing the doors. And in another version by a different speaker that I'll talk about later, the line is glosser na oighche, which I actually prefer because you have two prepositional phrases. Sop isna finneoga, agus, I should point out that broad L in Rhine, amongst certain speakers, typically I think was it the farmers as opposed to the fishermen, might be the other way around, had this uvular L, glas, so glas na dorsje, very un-English sound, which makes it all the better, of course. But anyway, and I should point this out just as I'm going, in the book, Máirtín Verling's book, which is a fantastic book, wouldn't want to knock it, he puts in an apostrophe as if to say that the N is missing, but actually isna is more historical or older, more correct, than insna. The N was reintroduced by analogy, so isna is more stylish than insna, at least according to myself. Now, he says, Earr-de a vanity, rise in your sitting, basically sit up. Well, woman of the house, a vanity. This nowadays, of course, if I replace the dot consonant with the over dot, with the consonant followed by H, one of the big changes in the Caidán misspelling reform was, or deform, it was to replace IGHE with fadó, even though that in about half of Ireland, the northern half in particular, IGHE remains disyllabic. But anyway, they don't say key anyway in the north, they say taie. But anyway, that's the word tea, ban key, woman of the house. Teir a suas go farúil, go up manly, taid a nuas go flahúil. Now, in school Irish, I'll just mention it and I'll come back and talk about it later, that's spelt as tar, with a broad R. Since the time of Old Irish, the order to a single person, you, second person singular, has been taid, with a slender R. You do get tara in Connacht, and I can't remember, in parts of Ulster, tara, but taid with the slender R is the pronunciation Munster, and has been since the time of Old Gaelic. And come down princely. Notice that soas is for direction towards, and nos, come down from above. So, for example, tame, or in dumbed down school Irish, that spelling, I go up, and then time huas, I am above, agus tagim, and nos, I come down from above. I go up, so tame soas, time huas, agus tagim, and nos. But anyway, teir soas go flahúil, related to the word flah, a prince, or a ruler, related to the Welsh word glad. Play the old uifum glad, is it? Like in the Welsh national anthem. Glad meaning country in Welsh. Turlath, now he says, cool no oige. Bring with you the loaf heel, or the heel of the loaf, the butt end of the bread. Earr-de na leis. An important feature of East Munster Irish, Déis Irish, that monosyllables ending with a broad CH, so ATH, OTH, UTH, that TH has actually become a CH sound. So not da, but dach. Dach na leis, the colour of the flagstone, leach, and then the dative case lich, and the tishliginiduch, the dative case, the genitive case of a flagstone, lich. A make fide lame gere fiding into. That would be as long as a hare's jump, basically. I won't go into too much detail now on the grammar, but anyway, agus gere skinne earr-de, skinne, skien. Now skenne would be a bit more correct, but you often find that the letter E before nasal consonants M, N, and NG, or MH and NN as well, gets raised or closed to an I. Skinne, gare skinne earr-de. Now, there are some problems with spelling it like that. Maybe that would be a better spelling. But anyway, in height, notice that there's There's a difference in Munster between earr-de, which is height, as opposed to earr-de, in a high place, in a height. Put up your hand, curdláv an earr-de. Not there's also thing as curdláv suas. That means put your hand indefinitely upwards. Curdláv an earr-de. Put your hand up into a high place. Put your hand up into a height. Now he says, Bavalium sa dioch wanye, vog vilish. I would like a drink of soft sweet milk. Dioch being a feminine noun, so it's a singular feminine noun, so it softens or unites the first consonant, so wanye becomes wanye. Now he pronounces it as a W in this case. You find that in Waterford sometimes, that typically in Munster Irish, broad BH, so BH before A, O, U, is pronounced as bilabial V, just the lips, no teeth, but sometimes in Waterford, and kind of sporadically throughout Munster even, it won't be a bilabial fricative, v, but more like a W, a bilabial approximant. And of course, a very important feature of most of Munster Irish, excluding southwest Cork, so Carbery basically, Kerry and partially, and well, most of County Clare, particularly the southwest of it. But in most of Munster and even in South Leinster, slender in N or INN is pronounced as an ING. So he pronounces that as a wanye with this letter ing, which would be a wonderful addition to the Latin alphabet. But anyway, wanye he says, or wanye, wog vilish, gan conhin gan ribbe. Conhin is like a particle, or a speck, whatever. Gan ribbe, without a rib of hair. Now, I was talking to a group of people once, and I was translating the word ribbe, and I said, sure, that's like the English word, a rib of hair, and none of them had heard of a rib of hair. They had heard of a strand of hair, but not a rib of hair. But anyway, what's the world coming to at all that people don't know what a rib of hair is? A nech uachtar na wallog, that there would be cream in its belly. That in school, of course, would be spelt as M-E-A-D-H, with broad D-H being pronounced as a C-H in verbs, with the exception of the sair friher, the autonomous verb in the past tense in outside of Kerry. So a nech, that's often pronounced, at least in Kerry, with and not ach, as you might think from this dummy vowel being added in. So a nech uachtar na wallog, and notice the epenthetic vowel, the inserted vowel there between a tongue front sonorant, so LN, R, and a voiced obstruent, M, B, D, G, or indeed any of those consonants with a H after it, with certain exceptions. Agus Anocht na chiusa. Now, notice that MH regularly disappears before S. So, for example, another word, taishe, the size of something, or nyafushich, which is, you'll often see it spelled like that nowadays, nyafushich, but it comes from nyav. It comes from that, not having size, so being unimportant or inconsequential. But nyafushich, dorchik, nyafushich, he said it without meaning much by it. But that's a rule, or it's a predictable pattern that MH before S disappears. So you might think that this might be kjufse or kjuse, but it's not. It's actually a form of the word kjus, or nowadays that tends to be the dative form, the prepositional form tends to have replaced that and become kjush, like at the start of Court de Verling, but nach me shule kjush na hound. Le brecken leis en drocht go traum. Og nå vaantje goed sen drocht go traum. Agus Leabhar, this is an interesting word, fresh milk. This is actually an old corruption of leabh, lacht being an old word for milk, or liquid, actually related to the Welsh word leis, both coming from Proto-Celtic that. Well, that was probably a sound at the time, but they could both use that spelling. to predict that would correspond perfectly to the modern pronunciations. Lacht, there's something in the back of my mind that says lacht was used in Leinster as a word for milk, but anyway, I won't say more about that for the moment. This word Anocht, as Mícheál pronounces it, also corresponds to the Welsh word llefrith in is that Northern Welsh, I think, whereas llaeth is Southern Welsh. But anyway, fresh milk on the edges. And to get it, this is an important part that I might just point out, and we can discuss it if you want me to. When I go into the more detailed analysis of each and every word, English says to get it. So you have the infinitive and then the object. Irish has the other way around. It has the object and then there is no infinitive in Irish, but you use the verbal noun instead. So not to get it, but it to get. And notice that because he's talking about deoch, a drink, which is a feminine word, he uses and to get her, referring to deoch. And to get it from a fair maiden, this comes from the word breen or brew, which can mean a breast or chest, or can mean womb sometimes, and bright, so bright-chested, fair-chested. But nowadays it means a fair maiden. Nino, this is the word daughter. It shouldn't, in Old Irish, the word for nail, ingham, and daughter were both spelt the same, but the word for daughter has a lenited G. So in Old Irish, it was in yin, literally born into. In Old Irish, in Igena. But anyway, that nowadays, so that would be with the H, and of course they got rid of as many GHs in the middle of words as they could. So that's the spelling that's taught in schools. And notice that there's the vocative particle missing there. You never get a short, unstressed vowel next to another vowel in Irish, so you don't say and o. We'll ignore the shameful exceptions. So not and o, but o, that the short, unstressed vowel gets dropped next to another vowel. So it literally means daughter, but it can just mean my dear female. Now I'm running out of time, so I'm going to have to fly through this. So ní hé an bainne, again ng, milk from today. Now it should be said that the reason that I've just told you that Dublin in East Munster, including, well, in most of Munster excluding Kerry and Carbery in Cork and parts of Clare, I've said that INN is pronounced as ING, and you'd say then, well, why isn't this pronounced Ingniuv? Now, wrongly or less historically, in East Waterford, you actually do find that pronunciation sometimes, and even in Moose Cree, but it's because it actually originally comes from that, two separate words, in day or in today. For Ingniuv, the same with Ine, that it was originally two separate words, Ine, and there are arguments for spelling it like that, and there are also arguments for not spelling it like that. But anyway, so it isn't the milk from today or the milk from yesterday, on bainne, onye, non bainne that I would like, that would be good with me, or fair, or female, or daughter, my dear. Mach. Now, don't think that is the word, that is the copula or a negative particle. That's actually just a form of the word ach, which itself is a form of the word acht, but, B-U-T, used in East Munster, and you also find it in Kilkenny Irish when Kilkenny Irish was alive and well. So it isn't milk from all those times that he wants, but fresh, soft milk. Nach Leabhar bug milish. I'll come back and talk about the gender of Leabhar in another video when I have more time. So this is all repetition. And then he says, us, and now that's spelled like is, I-S in school, but I much prefer to spell it like that, apostrophe US, just to save the confusion of what, that you wouldn't think that it's the copula, the word is, whatever. You would think that it would choke me. And again, notice that in Munster, E for the A, in a stressed syllable except after or is pronounced as ia. Near of them, it wouldn't be a danger to me in school Irish that's misspelt as bol. This gives the wrong pronunciation in the Tuishil Ginneduch. You think that would be buil, but it's actually boil, because the AO is in reality in front of a broad consonant that has disappeared in speech. But anyway, Ní mis sé píra so ptisa. Now, if this is a surname, IGH in surnames, or indeed in place names, is often dropped. So that could be Diarmid o Ptisig, as you might think, but the IGH will be dropped anyway. Now, Diarmid o Dunye, again, INN in most of Munster pronounces NG or Dunye. Now, Diarmid o Dunye, who is never settled. So this is the word Koni, but this word comes from ko ni, which means down, and actually the word sui, sitting. So to never settle down, and the word suise is actually related to the word set in English, if you go back far enough into Proto-Indo-European. So who never settle down, and sorry, I've spelt the word rev again, not as rav as you might think from the spelling, but o before the slender consonant often pronounces e. That would be a much better spelling. But anyway, I've only 4 minutes to get through this. Again, but a poor little boy, nach garsonian bocht, garson, gan gari gan gort, without a garden, without a field, who his father was lost. There's no word for who in Irish, so whose, sorry. There's no word for whose in Irish. You'd better off translate it, or it might help you to translate it as who his, or as the case may be, who hers, or who they, or whatever. In school Irish, you'll probably learn that as Kylach, but better would be in Kerry Irish. Okay, well, I'll explain this and I'll shut up then. I'll get around to the boo 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 afterwards. That would be Cailloch, but after about 1200, 1300, that DH became a GH, Cailloch, and then variously in Kerry it became a CH, in Cork it became a GH, a BH or a GH, and then in Waterford and Ossory and Kilkenny it became a G. So he says Cailloch Aher. His father was lost, whose father died. Rá croig arag, and notice again the uvular L, the broad L, Rá croig arag. A hard spring day, Agus bog. So right, if I were to, if I were to spell that out, B-A-G-H, but basically in the dialect that in East Munster, that just becomes bog, was drowned, or one drowned his mother. A wahid, and notice the nasal vowel that he has there, because M-H or M-shave is a nasal consonant. A wahid, he says, a gjuch moor schnechte. In school that's spelled as C-I-T-H, which might imply that the pronunciation is ki. It's not, it's kjuch. Again, broad TH at the end of a word in East Munster is a ch. Now, in Munster we don't say more, we say moor, although you often find that in East Munster, even that becomes moor. Kjochmoor schnechte, that's more correct than what's said in Cork and Kerry, sometimes schnechtig. Schnechte is the more historical genitive. So whose mother drowned in a big shower of snow. No, that's a very shallow, or at least I consider it shallow, overview. We'll finish off this bit and then we can get on to the prayers. So he says, boo boo boo, shine mach de chaur, stretch out your help or your body. I don't know, he had two different versions. Woman of the house, and that you may be 7 times better on the coming of sound reached. Yeah, we'll come back and talk about that and send in the questions, and maybe during Mícheál I'll try to answer some of those questions. Tágama.